this week's episode of the SaaS Marketing Show. I'm not too sure what happened. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode. Okay, so we had the audio playing like 3 times. I'm sorry about that. So welcome to this week's episode of the SaaS Marketing Show. I am joined today by Amar from ZenMaid, and we're going to be talking a little bit about their online event strategy, their online summit that they've been running, and how they use that to increase conversions by 50%. I'm going to bring Amar onto the screen in a couple seconds, but first of all, before we do that, it's typical when we run things live. Sometimes there are mistakes. I think it's because I had the YouTube window open at the same time, Amar. But yeah, hopefully everyone can hear us. You can see us. If you have any questions today and you are watching this live, go ahead and use the chat section or the comment section wherever you're watching to bring those in. We are live streaming today thanks to our partners, our sponsors, Restream. So a big thank you to them for making this happen. Usually with no slip ups, it was purely user error this time, which is hilarious. So let me bring on today's guest, which is Amar. So here we go, Amar. Thank you for jumping on with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this live.
Yeah, no worries. Dude, I was so confused as to what was happening. I was like, why does the intro keep playing? And it was because I had the YouTube window open on my other screen. So there we go.
Yeah.
Cool. Today we're going to talk all about you and the team at ZenMaid and what you've done with your online summits. So this is something that you've been running for, I know 2020 wasn't the first time you've done this. So I know this isn't purely a COVID pandemic play of like, oh shit, we need to run a summit because we don't know what else to do, right? So I'm keen to chat about that. Before we do, maybe we could just jump quickly into a little bit more about ZenMaid, kind of the stage that you're at right now, and you can just set the scene for anyone that is watching us live or tuning in later.
Yeah, absolutely. So ZenMaid is a simple scheduling software for maid services. So it's a very specific niche, the home cleaning niche. We only work with residential cleaners, which does not include obviously commercial or like Airbnb. So like true maid services. That's who we work with. So we've been doing that since 2013. Started off very slowly, but it's ramped up quite nicely over the past couple of years. So we have a team of about 25 people now, mostly part-time, like contractors and some agency help and stuff like that. I think we have maybe 4 people on the team that are actually full-time, and so we just crossed the $100,000 MRR mark a week or two ago, a couple of weeks ago, that we just crossed that. So that was like pretty big milestone for us. And like you were saying, the Maid Summit is something that this year will be our 3rd year running it, and that's played a big part in our growth in the past 3 years.
That's awesome. So let's talk about that then. Let's just jump straight into the Maid Summit. Like you said, this will be your 3rd year running that. How big a part of your growth has the summit been? Like I know it's hard to quantify that sometimes, right? But like when we look at how are you guys like attracting new customers, new users, etc. Like what are some of the other activities that you're doing as well alongside the summit, just so we can kind of put things into perspective, like how much impact something like this can and does have for you and the team?
Yeah, so one thing is just my background is more in sales. I'm a non-technical founder. And so when I started the company, it was because I found that I really enjoyed marketing and no one would really give me a chance at it. So we do a lot of marketing stuff. That the summit was just one of many experiments that we've run. And it happened to really hit home with our audience and to work really well. And my favorite thing about it is that it essentially combines all of the other kind of advertising or marketing channels and elements that we've spent a bunch of time learning and developing over the years. So outside of the summit, we spend, $15,000 a month on paid advertising that generates, obviously a bunch of leads. We do partnerships and cross promotions with industry partners. We have lots of articles that generate SEO traffic and, just general industry expertise that really gets emphasized, helps us to build the brand and to build trust and everything. We started off the company with cold email and cold calling, right? And I'm probably forgetting about a couple of other things there, but I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, cool. And so with the summit itself, let's get into that. So I think, as we were saying before we started and just after we started this, like over the last year, online summits are becoming even more popular, right? Because there is no alternative. There's no like trade shows or anything else like that. I've seen that in the SaaS world, like live content, summits, webinars, etc., like have always been popular, right? Like everyone's used to watching webinars for like product overviews and Q&A sessions, or like webinars for top of funnel, lead acquisition, all this kind of stuff. People have been running that for a while, but only over the last year has it become even more important part of everybody's strategy. Now, I think the majority of times when I see a company organizing an online summit or an online event, it usually looks to me as though they didn't really know what else to do. So they put together a webinar and called it a summit, or they tried to pull in a couple guests and they called it a summit, but often it's not actually that impactful for them as a business. Like I think there's a whole industry now, right, of like online events that's just boomed over the last year. So when you decided to start this 2.5, 3 years ago, whenever the first one was, because I know this year is the third one, like what's the process like? How do you decide, okay, what are we going to do to make this actually impactful for our audience, for us as a business? Like, I'd love to just find out a bit about that first, and then go into like some of the specific kind of things that you've done that have worked, maybe things that haven't worked with the summit, etc.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great question, because figuring out how to make it kind of unique and how to make it work was something that we have definitely been challenged by. And last year we actually made some adjustments compared to the first year that actually backfired on us, which we can talk about like in a moment. But what we essentially did is, so we don't do it live, that we just have too many problems. I mean, you saw like the very beginning of this call, right? Of like the intro playing twice. Like each year we have between 40 and 50. This year might be as many as 60 speakers on the summit. It would be completely impossible. Like it would just be just horrible to try to do that live. So for us, it really is a series of webinars. And so the big thing that we did was, if you're only doing one webinar, then you're not likely going to attract that many people, particularly when, they probably don't need help with that specific thing. And so what we did was we made it so that any maid service owner could look through the entire summit. And we specifically told them, don't try to watch all of the talks. Don't even try to watch most of the talks. It's out of the 45 talks, our focus, and we've asked the speakers to really focus on actionable content, right? The goal is that every one of these talks, you can watch it and you can walk away from the talk with something to actually do in your maid service to run a better business today, tomorrow, and going into the future. And so we tried to get people to really focus on which talks are going to have the biggest impact on your business right now, and focus just on watching those and not on trying to do this fire hose approach where you just take in like every single thing. And then the other thing that we did is we made the speakers much more available during the week of the summit. So they're all very active in our Facebook group. So that's actually something that I forgot to mention in terms of marketing that we're already doing, is we have a very engaged community on Facebook. And so what happened was we essentially ran pre-recorded webinars at specific times. We can talk about kind of the monetization after and all of that stuff. But we took all of the speakers and we asked them to be present in the Facebook group. And for each talk, we posted a thread, and then folks could come in and could ask questions, and I would come in and answer, or the actual speakers would come in and answer. And so it was kind of asynchronous access to all of the speakers was a big part of kind of the offering that we made.
Got it. That makes sense. Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's I wanted to figure that out too. It's like, okay, how much of this is live and pre-recorded, or what? Because I think that's the challenge sometimes, right? With like pre-recorded things or webinars, it's like, okay, you can watch them, but then if you have questions and you can't ask, or you can ask them, but no one's going to answer them, it kind of like destroys the benefit of these things, right? So that makes sense. That was one of the things I wanted to know. Is like, did you have something else set up where people can engage with speakers, ask questions, stuff like that. So that's really cool. Okay. And tell me a bit more about, like, I know, so you touched on the Facebook community being a big part of this as well. I know that you and the team, this wasn't like a free summit, right? Like people were paying to be part of this too. So I want to find out, like, how not the revenue that was like done as a result of the summit or anything like that, but like how much of this was, okay, in the back of your mind, or when running something like this, that the people that you're attracting to this summit, they're like the ideal customer for your service, right? But you don't need to push your software, you don't need to push it on them throughout the summit. Like, how did you find that balance of, okay, we're charging for this summit, we're going to make it a really valuable piece of content in itself, but then I know that also some other founders or people in SaaS teams will be like, oh, but we need to make sure it converts to this number of trials immediately or this number of registrations. Like, how did you find that balance within the business? I guess it's maybe a little bit easier with it being like your business and you being involved, right? But tell me about the kind of planning and strategy around that, because I think that's important to touch on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very blessed because I'm like the lead marketer in the company and I'm the CEO. So I'm my own boss, like as the CMO, and that makes things a lot easier. That this is probably not going to be a very helpful answer, to be completely honest, but I very much ignore those sorts of things. That when I presented this to the team, I was like, look, guys, if we ran this only for our customers, so we didn't sign up a single new person, but it helped our customers to be more success, this will be a success, right? And so one thing is, so we do the entire event for free, that we just more trust. Well, so one thing here is, I feel like this really comes down to knowing your industry or knowing your niche. For us, we are just so specific in our language and everything that's presented there that it's obvious that everyone that's going to sign up for this is going to be a maid service owner, right? Like, it just wouldn't be relevant if you were a lawn care owner, like, someone that's working with, who has a green pal who you interviewed like the other day or whatever. And so for us, we just knew that if we made this valuable to the industry and if we made it free, the goal of this was to create something that everyone in the industry would talk about without it being like they were talking about ZenMaid or endorsing ZenMaid. So that's why it's not the ZenMaid Summit. It's not the Maid Summit by ZenMaid. It's just the Maid Summit, right? And without it, signs up for the summit, joins our, sort of took that approach. Where you're seeing the pricing on the screen is we charged after the fact. So for us, the big like live element was, you can sign up and you can watch any of these talks, any of these 45 talks you can watch for free during this 1 week period, and then for the 2 days after. But we don't actually recommend that because you can't implement all the stuff. So if you want it 3 days after the spike is done, then you have to pay us for all of the replays and you get access to all of the replays for life. And then the other thing that we did that stacked on top of it even more is we also publish all of the summit talks for free over the following year. And we're very upfront about that as well. So you can pay for immediate access to all of them, or if you wait 52 weeks or 45 weeks or however long it takes us to get them all out, then you can access them all for free on YouTube. And so that was essentially how we gave it for free. We got the big marketing angle. We converted a bunch of those people into software users like after the summit. But then we also made, I think it was $7,000 the first year and maybe $10,000 like last year that we that we made from actually running the thing. That's probably about break even when you take into account all of our costs and everything. But again, like, I don't pay attention too much to that stuff. I'm really not the best person to ask when it comes to numbers.
But I think that's important though, right? Because like sometimes you just know the impact of marketing is like, that if you do this, it's going to work. Like it's clearly going to work, right? Like it doesn't matter if it doesn't make front end like profit. If just the fact that you can make sales on the front end of this and like quote unquote like break even on that part, like that's great in itself, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
The value comes after. So that's really cool. One thing you said, which I want to pick up on, that I think would be very interesting for a lot of SaaS marketers to actually just consider and think about is when they are running, whether it's summits, webinars, content campaigns, anything that they're doing. You talked about how basically the content itself, like this summit, was the like qualifier as to whether someone was relevant or not, because it's very, very clear, hey, if I'm attending your maid service like summit, then it's like you said, I'm not going to be in lawn care, I'm not going to be somewhere else. Like the title of the summit, everything that's going on, it shows that if you're attending that, you know that those are the right quality people. Like, of course, there's going to be some that don't necessarily fit into the ideal customer criteria or whatever, but they're going to be within that sphere. And I think that's something that people should maybe consider a little bit more with any of their piece of content they're putting out, events they're running, anything else. It's like, you don't always need this like super long, complex sign up form to qualify people and all this like complicated stuff in the back end for lead scoring and everything else. Like, just think about how the content itself can be the qualifier, because I think that is often overlooked and people don't talk about that too much.
Yeah. And also the speakers and the sponsors, right? That all the speakers work with our industry specifically. And like sponsors, we didn't have any the first year. Last year, the pseudo mistake that we made was we accepted a couple of sponsors that didn't work with our industry specifically. And so because of that, then they promoted it and they were trying to help, but because they didn't actually serve our specific industry, we were just one little part of it. They felt like they were wasting and asked most of their audience, which they were. And then some of those people actually signed up and would then like complain of like, oh, next year you guys should do lawn care stuff. And it's like, well, we don't help lawn care companies, right? Like, maybe you're right, but that's not the business that I want to get into. And so, yeah, there's a couple different ways that you can qualify people without actually asking them or kind of like excluding them. There's other ways to filter people to your target audience.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And so talk to us about the kind of promotion of this summit and event a little bit too. So I know that you said you have a big or a well-engaged like Facebook community that you've leveraged for a long time now. You said you were running like paid traffic for the business as a whole in general too. Like, were those the two kind of core sources of registrations for this event, or is there anything else like cool that you were playing around with too? Like, obviously there's sponsors and the speakers promoting to their audience and everything else, but is there anything else cool that you kind of experimented with that either did work, didn't work for driving more people to sign up for this thing?
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons.
Oh, we've lost you. Okay, I'm just going to, Amar, I've just pulled you down from the stream for a second. So if you come back once your internet has figured itself out, please let me know. I should be able to see you in the box. So I'm just going to pull Amar down for a second and jump in here. For anyone who is watching us live right now, these are the things, right? Sometimes that can go wrong when we are going live. If you have any questions for Amar so far about his approach for running this online summit, please start to bring them in the comments now. Amar, I think I may see you back. Let's just try and bring you back on the screen. Are you there? Can you hear us? Oh, it seems to be lagging out again, Amar. I'll give you a couple minutes. I'm just going to remove you. There we go. Okay, so this has been very interesting so far. We're going to go on the fly with this whilst we see if Amar can get back in and joining us. I know a lot of SaaS marketers out there have been experimenting with and running online summits, online events for a long time now. Over the last 12 months, it's something that's becoming more and more important to your strategy. So if you are thinking about running summits or you have any questions about online summits, please drop them in the comment section below right now. If you're watching this on the live stream, hopefully Amar will be able to come back in a few minutes and answer some of these for us and give you some support. In the meantime, I think something else people can consider when looking at running an online event or an online summit is whether or not they could live stream these talks, these these events out to their audience? I know Amar was talking about running them in the Facebook group and maybe some other channels. So when he comes back, we'll talk to him about how he did that. But one way that you can take one video feed like this and stream it out to multiple places is through using a tool like Restream, how we're going live today. Now, I think Amar may have just joined us back, so I'm going to bring him back on. Hey, Amar, how you doing? We good? Yeah, I actually can't hear you. Oh, there we go. Okay, I think we're back.
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying that's island internet for you.
No worries. You're good.
So, okay, cool. So what you were asking before I got cut off there is how we sort of promoted it. And so the beautiful thing about the Maid Summit was that it allowed sort of everyone in the industry to talk about ZenMaid without talking about ZenMaid, because everyone that signed up for the Maid Summit joined our email list and then would learn about the software and blah, blah, blah. And so one of the reasons that we did this was because we felt like if we ran it and then just plugged it into all of our normal marketing channels, that it would just inject some, some new blood, right? Some new copy into everything. And so we pretty much ran it through everything that we typically do with promoting the software. So the first thing is we had a big email list already that really helped to get it out there. And of course, that feels very much like cheat mode, because you email it out to your list, and then of course your list shares it, and then you begin to see it on other platforms and everything without you having to do as much. But we still did all of like the work there. So when we found all of the speakers, we already had good relationships with all the speakers, but we asked them to email their lists as well. And then we also asked them to promote in their Facebook groups, or for permission for us to promote in their Facebook groups for them, right? So then we got to plug into a bunch of other people's audiences about like their actual talks. And of course, if I post in one of the consultants groups going, hey guys, sign up for ZenMaid, maybe some people will sign up, but chances are like it's not the right time, all of that stuff. If instead I go, hey, the admin of this group is giving, an awesome talk on XYZ, click here to register, then you get way more people from that group that are going to be interested like in doing that. So we had our community, which really helped to push everything out. Then we had everyone else's community. We had their email lists. We had our email lists. We got a very, very good lead acquisition cost through paid advertising as well, just running paid ads and whatnot. And then we even took the time that we had a team member that went through and like DM'd everyone on Instagram that was following us, right? And just DM'd every Maid service, just going, hey, are you attending the Maid Summit? And that surprisingly worked quite well as well. But our general philosophy with everything marketing that we do is we just try to be everywhere. And so that's kind of what we were trying to do there, is we just wanted to make it seem like anywhere that you looked, for about a 2-week period, all that people were talking about was the Maid Summit. And that was very effective for us both years.
That's awesome. And then I know that you talked earlier a little bit about how you then like drip feed out each of the talks across the year, across like your YouTube channel and elsewhere. Does the Maid Summit essentially just build your content for the like 12 months ahead? Is that one of the other reasons why you or like sub reasons why you set this up, right? Is because it makes content creation a lot easier too?
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of an added benefit that I hadn't really taken into account. Like I kind of knew that we were going to do that and that we were going to repurpose everything. But honestly, it's pretty magical at this point, because we've got a decent sized team. So I'm not doing too much of the work on a day-to-day basis anymore. And for us to be able to publish a brand new article every single week and a new video on our YouTube, and it automatically goes out to all of our channels to promote it, is pretty magical. And you combine that with a weekly newsletter that announces that video and article, and then plus some of our other content, and it very much feels like we don't have to think about this all that much, that we have 3 people that essentially make that entire process happen without any direction from me on a weekly basis. And so yeah, that's been massive for us as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so if someone watching this or listening to this was thinking about launching their own online summit for their SaaS business, what would be like one thing that you would tell them to absolutely avoid, like a mistake that you made when you were running yours?
Oh, mistake that we made when running ours. That's a good question. I mean, we didn't make it, but definitely be careful about doing it live. That the bigger that you do it, if you do it live, it just opens up so much more margin of error. So that's like a really big one. The mistake that I made last year was allowing sponsors to come in late, where they asked if they could sponsor the event. We said yes. And the truth is we didn't need the money. Like, it didn't really matter to us, the money that they were like offering us, but by accepting the sponsors rather late, the sponsors were expecting, you know, certain promos like with the summit of a dedicated email and a couple of things like that that we didn't have planned in ahead of time. And so that really interrupted the schedule. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we avoided a lot of the mistakes that could really like trip you up, but you know, it's plan it out. It's find articles online, find courses online that lay out the summit for you. And then like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You only really need to reinvent a couple pieces of it to make it unique and to make it yours. But a lot of the stuff is pretty straightforward if you're following a good model.
That's cool. And I guess now people could kind of look at what you and the team have done with your summits too, for like a good model to follow and take a look at from the perspective of actually like making this summit happen in the back end. Like, I know that you talked about how all the talks were like pre-recorded, they weren't going out live, like you just touched on. Like, how did you actually, like, you said you were putting the talks in a Facebook group, right? Or was there other places like what actually brought everything together to make that happen? Were you getting the speakers to record the videos, send them to you, you were then running them in the group, or was there like a platform that you were using to run things, or what was the kind of
we used a tool called Hey Summit that organizes the entire thing. And so we essentially would upload all of the videos unlisted to YouTube, and then would plug that link into the Hey Summit platform, and then at a specific time, those videos would begin playing and everything. We wouldn't have done the summit if we didn't have access to a technology like that. It was just too big of an undertaking for like uncertain results. So when we found that software, that was the reason. That's what finally got us to do it, because I'd been looking at online summits since 2015. And so, yeah, in terms of like the process before that though, all of the summit speakers will record their videos and will send them to us ahead of time. And then we have our video editor that will go through them, that will add like a countdown to the beginning. We'll add a couple, you know, pop-up panels throughout the video, and then we'll like check the end and all of that. And we do some quality control and all of that stuff. Actually, that brings me to one thing, is if you're going to do pre-recorded videos, make sure that you are very clear on what's acceptable and what's not. That my wife was the video editor for the first summit that we did, and she wanted to murder me and a couple of the speakers, because some people sent over like a PowerPoint recording. Apparently you can record a presentation in the actual PowerPoint software, which we didn't know. And it was a huge nightmare. It was like slide by slide. It would show the slide, and then they'd have the audio in this just really weird format. And she must have spent hours trying to get that to work. And so last year when we did it, it was like for everyone, it was you use Zoom or you use Loom, and you upload it into this folder. It has to be in this file format. And if it's not like this, like on this day, then we can't run your talk, because we actually ran into that. I mean, that PowerPoint one was the worst of the bunch, but we had quite a few problems like that the first year, which were very, very frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. That makes a ton of sense. So like having firm kind of guidelines in place, because I know that some people, even though if they're like industry figures or whatever, like they're still not used to, a lot of people don't do like video content and stuff like that either.
Exactly.
Right? Having some guidelines for them would help a ton. So I can see that, because I've been involved in a couple of summits before too, and like you see the variety of quality that people put together is like wildly different, right? Depending on how much they've done that kind of stuff before.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that's like you did with this summit or are doing with the summit that has really supported you guys a lot, that's been like, hey, this has been a great impact that we either didn't think about, or this is one thing that we tried that's worked really well? Because I think in general overall it's super clear, like the approach that you've taken, how you identify the how the summit's going to work, the speakers, how we run it, etc. Like that's really clear. And I think it's the thing with online summits, in my opinion, is that I think the playbook, like many marketing things, is very easy to access. It's very clear to see how to make these things work. But I think most people kind of try and like skip the core necessary steps and run it like 50% pace, and then it doesn't work out for them. Like in my mind, with an online summit or any live event or anything you're doing, is like, if you can clearly identify, okay, we know who our target customer is, let's put together something that's going to help them. Let's bring in a load of great speakers. Let's make sure we're not just like constantly spamming our product throughout this whole event. Let's actually just focus on the value. Then we use it to create the content, and for all our follow-ups and everything like that is going to have a positive impact. And I think that's maybe a mistake that people make, though, is they just try and like speed through it. Because clearly from what you've said, it's going to take dedicated resource as well, or like a number of people. You can't just like throw this together, because it won't be what you expect it to be. But is there anything else that we maybe miss or that you've done that you think is really cool that would help some other people out?
I think our monetization strategy, I definitely think, is something that a lot more people could do, of giving it away for free so that you get as many leads as humanly possible during that hype cycle, and then charging for it after. I think that's something I haven't seen anyone else doing that. And I think that's a really, really good thing. But one thing that I don't think that we've touched on in this conversation that I think is worth pointing out is so two things really. So before we ran our first summit, we changed to usage-based pricing. So we're now in a position where the more successful that our customers are, the more successful that we are as a company. And we're quickly closing in on that kind of magical point where we can actually continue making more money by simply helping our current customers grow, even taking into account the customers that churn, right? And so with that in mind, that's what kind of turned the Maid Summit into a no-lose proposition for us. Was even if we didn't get a single customer out of it, we knew that if this helped our 500 clients at the time to add, if half of them were to add one more employee, right, that they would be paying us, $2,000 more per month in perpetuity, right? And so one thing that we do think about with all of our marketing that would be helpful for anyone that's thinking about this is think about how you can make it insanely valuable to essentially three sets of people. So the obvious one is you want to make it valuable to people that aren't using your product, but you want to use your product. And that's what most people think about when they're planning something like this, is they're all about, what can I do to sell those people my software? But what we found is really helpful is to take into account, how do we make this valuable to someone that's already paying ZenMaid and isn't going to pay us any more money? And then from a marketing perspective, it's, how do we get someone that is never going to use ZenMaid, that maybe, I don't know, doesn't like me personally or something along those lines, and is never going to sign up for ZenMaid? How do we make this event so insanely valuable that even that person will sigh and enter their email and will sign up? And if you go into it with that mentality, I think that really will guarantee success, even if success doesn't show up maybe in your metrics the way that you want it to, right? Or the way that you expect it to. And then just the last thing to touch on there in terms of the results that we did get, we're a SaaS company. Things grow very consistently, but quite slowly, I feel like, in comparison to agencies and to lots of other business models. So it's very rare that you do something like a summit and it just doubles your business overnight, right? Because it takes time. Like, people have to be ready to sign up. There's an onboarding process. They've got to build up, blah, blah, blah. What was interesting for us was that we saw every significant funnel metric across the board improve for us. And so we saw more signups after running the summit, which makes sense. We generated a bunch more leads. But interestingly, we saw more of those leads, like by percentage, a higher percentage of people that trialed ended up signing up for the software. A higher percentage ended up like activating on the software, a lower percentage churned. And we saw the churn percentage go down significantly for the following 6 months, I think, that you could see a direct impact on that. And then when it like quote unquote stabilized, our churn stabilized at a lower churn rate than we were experiencing prior to the summit, right? And then of course, it completely took our relationship with a bunch of people within the industry to the next level, right? So then when we did it the following year, we had a bunch of people that were reaching out to us throughout the year because they wanted to be speakers on the next year's summit. And so in a lot of ways, doing the summit has made our lives easier in ways that we couldn't really imagine prior to that. So it's had a lot of both tangible and trackable benefits, but it's also had a lot of intangible benefits that just like I said, they make our lives so much easier.
Yeah, and in theory, when you think about it, it makes total sense though, right? Because it's like, think about all of the SaaS products out there that, for example, if you look at let's say Drift or HubSpot or some of these other big players, like there are alternative tools to those that are easier to use, better priced, more enjoyable to work with in many cases. But Drift and HubSpot and these other big brands, they've built brand and they've built that trust, right? And so that has an impact on, like, we did a podcast episode. He doesn't work there anymore, but a guy called Bill who used to lead SEO and paid ads at Drift, and he was saying that like his job was so much easier. His paid ads would convert at such a lower cost than anywhere else he'd been before, just because of the brand that they've built. And so it's kind of a similar thing. And it's even with like me and my team so I have an agency, Hey Digital, where we work with SaaS companies, right? And it's like we don't do any outreach or any like sales activities or anything like that, because we don't need to. Not to say that, hey, of course we could, like, you can always grow more and generate more leads and more sales or whatever if you want, but like we're in a spot where we don't need to, just because of the podcast, the LinkedIn posts that we do, and like our work that we share online. It's like that when people have a call with me or with someone on my team, they trust us more already. And that ties into like what you said about the summit and seeing that impact on your conversion numbers, on your churn numbers, and everything else. Like, to me, it makes total sense. It's just like, sometimes when we're planning out different activities, most people, and even me, when I set something like this up, or maybe when you did, you maybe didn't necessarily think about that as one of the first things, because that's like an impact kind of like 4 steps down the line or down the road, right? But I think that's something that I want to encourage people to think about too. It's like these, of course, it may be challenging if you're in a company that's like got a ton of VCs checking everything that you're doing and need to see all of these metrics and everything else. But if you can find a CEO or a CMO that you're working with who like they truly actually understand and believe in marketing, like these activities just make so much sense. Like they may not have that direct impact, but when you look at the impact 6 months down the line, like you just said, on churn reduction, on trial conversion rate increasing, like it's very clear that this brand play is so important, and people forget about that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. Yeah, great way to summarize it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, this has been great. Like, thank you so much for joining me today, Amar, and coming on and like sharing how you approach the summit that you I appreciate it. And I think we can wrap this up. Yeah, we'll wrap this up now. So thank you for joining me today, and thank you everyone for like watching this. If you watched it live, for listening on the podcast app. I will see you all very, very soon. Thanks, Amar.
Thanks for